All right, class. Today we'll talk about chapter 9. So basically, today we'll talk about a couple of capital budgeting decision criteria. So we'll go over some proxies or tools that will help us to decide about our capital budgeting decisions. So we'll start with net present value. And so far, in this course, we actually learned about net present value or NPV, right? So when you talk about NPV or net present value, so you basically compare the present value of investment today and the discounted value of all the expected cash inflows of future. So we basically compare our investment value today and the discounted value of all the inflows of future, and then we decide should we take the project or not. And we know that if NPV is more than zero, positive, we should always accept the project. NPV is zero, we're indifferent, neutral. NPV is negative, we should not take the projects because negative NPV project means we are destroying the value. So let's start with example. We learned about definitions, concepts in the previous classes. So we know what is NPV, we know how to take a project based on NPV, we know the decision criteria. So start with the example. So if we look this example, we can see that year zero, this is our investments, 165,000. And from that projects, we're gonna get $63,120 year one, $7,800 year two, $91,080 year three. Another important informations, 12% discount rate. So what should be the NPV of the project? So I recommend all of you to pause the video here, calculate the NPV, then come back. So the NPV of the project, we can do it in two different ways. First of all, we can do it by hand. Like this is our investments today. First year cash flow discounted at 12% rate. Second year cash flow discounted at 12% rate. Third year cash flow. And this is the NPV of the project. NPV positive, we should take the project. Now, how can you do it in functional calculator? If you go to the calculator, go to the cash flow function. So the relevant information we need is from here, the cash flows. So what I did for saving the time, I actually converted all of those values, absolute values, in thousands of units. So that means 165 means 165 thousandths. So our cash flow zero is basically negative 165. Cash flow 1, 63.12, which is basically 63,120. One-time cash flow divided 1, frequency is 1. 70.8 from here. One-time frequency. And then 91.08 here. Compute NPV, discount rate 12%, scroll down, 12.6274. So times 1,000. So that means $12,627. And there is the answer, $12,627. So positive NPV, we should take the project. So for any capital budgeting decisions, any proxies we used, we have to go through some decision criteria to think about should we take the project or not, and should we, this tools or proxy is good or not. So these are the 4 questions we should always go through to decide whether NPV is a good proxy or not. First question, does NPV rule account for the time value of money or not? I should say, pause the video, think about it, and then come back. Answer is yes. If you think carefully, in NPV, we actually discount. We discount all the future cash flow, all the expected cash flow. So that is basically the consideration of time value of money. Does the NPV rule account for the risk of the cash flows or not? Yes, absolutely yes. Because we discount all the cash flow by the applicable or appropriate discount rate. So the appropriate required rate of return already account for the risk in it. Because if you can remember from the last class, discount rate is different based on the projects, and discount rate already takes care of the risk in it. So yes, it is. Does the NPV rule provide an indication about the increase in value or not? Pause the video, think of it, and then come back. Answer is yes. Let me explain why. If you look carefully here, what we are doing, comparing investment today with discounted value of all the expected cash inflows. So that means NPV is trying to tell us, if you invest in this project $165,000 today, if you discount all the cash inflows from that project, you are able to generate a value of $12,000. So NPV compares the discounted value of inflows and outflows, and it tells you, are you able to generate any wealth or not? And that's why, yes. Should we consider NPV for primary decision rule? So basically the idea is, going forward this chapter, we'll talk about different proxies to decide whether to take any project or not. And then we'll compare, is this proxy is a good one or not? So this question is asking you, is NPV is a good proxy or not to make a decision? Answer is yes, because it takes care of time value of money, takes care of the risks of the project, and it also answers whether we're generating any value or not. So answer is yes. Second proxy is called payback period. So basically the proxy payback period is trying to tell you how long in years, mostly, how long in years does it take to get the initial cost back? How long it takes to get the initial cost back. So basically in payback period, what they do, they actually compare the investment you make and all the cash flows in different years and how many years it takes to get the initial investments. And the caution here, it compares all the nominal value. I'll say, what does it mean by nominal? Next slide. So what is the decision rule, like the decision cutoff? You should accept any project if the payback period is less than some preset limit. So here preset limit means, let's say you want to invest in a project and you want all of your investment should be returned from the project by 2 years, or by 3 years, by 4 years. This 2, 3, or 4 is your preset limit. So if cash inflow from the project return all of your investment today within your preset limit, then yes, else no. So let's think about this original example, what we are trying to do so far. So the example is here, investment today $165,000, and these are the 3 cash flows, here 1, 2, and 3. So you set a preset limit of 2 years. You decided, if my initial investments is returned by next 2 years, I will invest, else no. How can we decide? End of year 1, we are getting $63,000, right? So that means our initial investment was $165,000. End of year 1, we're getting this much. So we are deducting this much. So end of year 1, we still need to get $101,000 of initial investments. Start with year 2, leftover. End of year 2, we are getting $70,000 from the projects. End of year 2, we still need that much of money to cover initial investments. Starting year 3, leftover. This is the year 3 cash flow from the project. So this should be negative. So that means by year 3, we have covered sufficient money of our initial investments. Now, if we ask you exactly how many years it takes to cover your initial investments, answer is 2 years, because end of year 2, your initial investment is not covered, plus you have $31,000 left and you got $91,000 from the project. So 31,080 divided by 91,080. So 2.34 years. The answer is, in your first 2 years, all of your cash flows do not exceed your initial investment. So 2 years plus the fractional leftover is $31,000. Over the years, you receive $91,000. So that means in the first 3.5 months, you actually receive your $31,000. So how to calculate? You have to decide first how many years, full years, your this balance is positive. How many full years, which is 2 here. And then when it becomes negative, you have to divide leftover, this leftover, year 2 leftover by year 3 cash flow. So 2.34 years. So the payback period is 2.34 years. Now, what was the preset limit? 2 years. So we decided if all of our investments is covered by 2 years or returned by 2 years, we should invest in these projects, which is not true here because we need 2.34 years. So we should return the project. Now, going back to the slide, nominal sense. So nominal sense means, if you look carefully, we are using the raw cash flow. We are not discounting all those cash flows like net present value problem. So we're actually looking at raw cash flow. So we are comparing our today's investments with year 1 raw cash flow, year 2 raw cash flow, year 3 raw cash flow. We are not discounting them back today. So that's what we're trying to say. How long does it take to get the initial cost back in a nominal sense? Excuse me. So this is how payback period works. Going back to 4 questions. Is payback is a good proxy or not? Pause the video, answer these 4 questions, then come back. Now, does the payback rule account for the time value of money? No, absolutely no. Because we do not discount any of the cash flow. No. Payback rule account for the risk of the cash flow? No. Because there's no discounting, so we have no record rate of return. We really don't know, given the risk of this project, what should be the appropriate rate of return for these projects. Does the payback rule provide an indication about the increase in value? We don't know, because we do not compare today's investment with the present value of all the expected cash flows. What you do, we just look at the raw numbers and we decide, or we find out within how many years our initial investments will be returned or covered. Should we consider the payback rule for a primary decision rule? No, because all of the prior answer is no. It doesn't cover time value of money, a very important principle of finance. It doesn't cover the risk, which is really, really important. And it do not tell us whether we are able to generate value or we're destroying value. So no. Pros and cons, we already talked about it. Easy to understand. Adjust for uncertainty of later cash flows. So basically talk about the raw values of later cash flows. Bias toward liquidity in a way, it actually tells us how long you need to get your investment. So it lower the number, better liquidity because you are getting money back early. Higher the number, not good liquidity because you will be repaid later. So this is some advantage. Disadvantage. Ignores time value of money, we know that. Requires an arbitrary cutoff. So this is really important to understand. So the cutoff we are talking about is completely arbitrary. Like you being an investor decide 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, or Like there is no rule of thumb, there is no certain policies to decide what should be the appropriate cutoff. So that's the problem. And it ignores the cash flows beyond the cutoff date. So now, most of the cases, this proxy works in a way is like how long it's gonna take to return your initial investment, how long it's gonna take to return your initial investments. So that means for this example, in the middle of the year 3, you are going to get your initial investment back, right? So what if this project generates year 4, year 5, year 6 cash flows? It will not gonna consider. So the problem is, as long as you know when you are getting back your initial investments, for this proxies, year 4, year 5, anything beyond that doesn't matter. It did not consider. But for NPV, we consider the entire projects. We consider the entire picture. So that's one of the disadvantage. So this is it, pros and cons. Next proxy, discounted payback period. So if you compare the names, payback versus discounted payback, the only difference is here. So the idea is, in a discounted payback period, we actually discount all the cash inflows and then compare with the initial investments. So the difference is, it actually tells you how long it takes to return or cover up your initial investments. However, cash inflows are compared in terms of discounted basis, not nominal basis. Same projects, how long it takes to get your initial investment back, but in terms of discounted basis. So present value invested today, value invested or money invested today should be compared. All the future value discounted back today. So that's why it's discounted payback. So steps are similar. You have to discount all of the cash inflows of future, then compare with the current cash flow, like current investments, cash flow zero, current investments. And then decision rule is same. You actually decide arbitrary cutoff, how long you want to be invested here. So within how many years you want all of your initial investment should be covered up. And then you decide yes or no. So again, we think about 2 years. So if you look carefully, initial investment still the same, but this cash inflow is discounted. 108. Started with 108. This cash flow is discounted again, back to 0. This is the remaining. And now, starting with that, this cash flow discounted again. So within 3 years, if you want to know the specific number, it should be 52202. That the remaining money you need to be covered up from your initial investments divided by your discounted cash flow, which is, let me see, 91080 divided by 1.12 to the power. Okay, so that's wrong. So 1.12 to the power 3. So this is the discount factor, 1.4049. So 91080 divided by 1.4049. So 64,830 is your discounted present value for year 3. 64,830. So 52202 divided by 64,803. Did you see that? For discounted cash flow technique, for discounted payback period technique, you need more time than the only payback period technique. So for the payback period, we need 2.34 years to cover for initial investments. For discounted payback, we need 2.80 years, more years, because we are discounting all these cash flows. Big picture is same, comparing how many years we need to cover up initial investments. In a payback period method, We just compare the raw numbers, no discounting, discounted payback methods. We discount all of the cash inflows of futures with today. Accept or reject? Absolutely not. Do not accept. Reject the project because we initially decided 2 years, but later we find that for this project, we need 2.8 years to cover up our initial investments. Okay, is it a good proxy or not? Pause the video again and think, is it a good proxy or not? Answer is, discounted payback rule account for the time value of money or no? Yes, we discount cash flow today. It takes care of that. Discounted rule account for the risk of the cash flow. Yes, because we have a record rate of return, which is based on risk. So it accounts for that. Discounted payback rule provided indication about the increase in value or not. We don't know. What we know only how many years we need to return our initial investments, but we don't know whether investing in this project by this proxy, we don't know whether investing in project we can generate value or not. Should you consider it as a primary decision rule? No, absolutely not. Pros and cons. So the good thing for discounted payback, improves time value of money. Easy to understand. Similarly, buyers for liquidity. Bad thing, even if it considered discounted, like the time value of money concept, it doesn't compare and doesn't give you the value. So sometimes it may reject positive NPV projects, because from the last example, we said that we need the money by 2 years and rejecting this project. However, from the NPV criteria, it was telling us this is a positive NPV project. So we're rejecting it. That's the problem. So that's the disadvantage. Similar problem requires arbitrary cutoff. Do not consider any cash flow after the cutoff. So that's all so far for today. Watch the video, go through the slides and topics. From the next class, we'll start from here, internal rate of return, a very important proxy. See you in the next class.